Quarantine, state of emergency, shelter in place. The story of the coronavirus changes by the hour. So how exactly did we get here? Well, it all starts...
Americans have seen surreal scenes play out in their backyards. Entire cities on lockdown. The Navy and National Guard deployed. Flights canceled, borders tightened.
Not within most people's lifetime. Has there been anything similar to this?
As COVID-19 rips around the world, America finds itself having to make startling decisions.
Public health disaster.
Normal is not in our game plan.
Stay home
and maintain social distancing.
In times like these, even our civil liberties, the bedrock of our Constitution, can be restricted as we potentially enter uncharted legal waters.
Liberties are being tested. What is really important, even in times such as this, that governments not go overboard. And that's the real test.
When China was first hit with the new coronavirus back in December, its totalitarian government responded with regional crackdowns. We watched as populated cities went dark and saw the consequences when people disobeyed orders. At the time, it felt like their policies could never be implemented here. China is a communist country. America is a democracy. But China's quarantine measures seem to have worked for now. The reported number of domestic cases is down to nearly zero. But now that the U.S. is facing a daily surge of new cases, governments are imposing rules that are changing the day-to-day lives of Americans.
Be a good neighbor, be a good citizen. Those young people that are still out there on the beaches thinking this is a party, time to grow up. Time to wake up.
Ordering non-essential businesses to close their doors. Shuttering schools, leaving many families to wonder how they're going to make ends meet.
What about the little guy?
It's a fine line officials are treading as they jeopardize many people's livelihoods. So what are the laws during a pandemic? The states have broad powers to quarantine and ban large gatherings. And President Trump can completely close the U.S. border, but his power to quarantine has limits. And when he declared a national emergency under the Stafford Act, it just gives him the power to redirect federal funds and resources. It was not a call for martial law.
Many reusing their masks. Some hospitals reporting a 50% surge in coronavirus patients. Here's ABC's Adrian Banker.
Tonight, a massive rush to get tested suddenly cut short. Hundreds of people arriving before 4:30 this morning, waiting in a mile-long line at New Jersey's biggest drive-through testing site. But just 30 minutes after opening, they hit capacity, and police had to turn people away. Medical professionals now advise that only those with severe cases seek medical help. Inside hospitals tonight, there's growing concern.
It's a scary time to be a doctor in America, and especially in New York.
Dr. Cornelia Griggs, a mother of two, is a pediatric surgeon who works with coronavirus patients at Columbia University Medical Center. She says she's worried the hospital could run out of masks, eye protection, and gloves. Her message on Twitter, "Don't make us orphan our two toddlers."
It's forced me to feel like I have to live apart from my children in order to protect them, and that breaks my heart.
Internal memos written by Columbia University's chief surgeon, Dr. Craig Smith, say that his hospitals have seen a 50% increase in coronavirus patients, burning through 40,000 masks every day, adding that officials predict the number of cases might not even peak for another 32 days. Two New York area medical professionals we spoke to tonight are worried about what lies ahead.
We're filling up our ICUs. We have several floors now that are devoted only to COVID positive patients.
There's a misconception out there that this is a disease that only affects the elderly and only affects people who have significant medical problems, and that's not what we're seeing in the hospitals around New York. We're seeing younger people.
Many doctors tell ABC News over the past few weeks they're being forced to reuse masks and protective gear. But even with the stories of nationwide shortages of N95 masks and other gear, Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City says it has sufficient supplies and is prepared for things to get worse.
Anyone? If anyone is thinking, taking any chances, just take a look at me. I'm in the intensive care unit. I can't breathe without this. I'm actually 10 times better right now than what I was before. I don't even know. I've lost count of the days. Please, none of you take any chances. I mean it. Because if it gets really bad, then you're going to end up here.
At Fort Detrick in Maryland, Army scientists are armed with face masks, rubber gloves, and test tubes. They are on the front lines in the fight against the coronavirus.
What we want to do is be able to prevent the disease, and the way to do that is through a vaccination. Some of the people here are going to be the heroes. They're going to help us defeat it.
Our cameras rolling exclusively inside one of the military's most important research and medical facilities, U.S. AMRID. Researchers here growing a live sample of the coronavirus for testing, studying its characteristics and behavior to try and find what will prevent it.
Behind these glass windows, lab techs are beginning a 2 to 3 week long process of multiplying and purifying the virus to understand how it spreads.
As the pandemic sweeps across the world, a shortfall in treatment has sparked a global race to find a vaccine. Army Secretary Ryan McCarthy telling me they are under pressure and up against time.
We don't have a lot of time because we're in this fight. People are dying. These people are working every day. I mean, they're working every day.
Helping to lead that charge, Army Dr. John Dye.
So this is actually a training lab that we use here at USAMRIID to train individuals on how to work in containment.
While scientists are working around the clock, a vaccine could still be 12 to 18 months away.
People think 12 to 18 months to get a vaccine. That's a long road.
So it is a long road. Not only do you have to develop the vaccine, like in the laboratory, the science part of the vaccine, but then you have to take that vaccine and you have to put it into human clinical trials to show that that vaccine is safe.
And as millions practice social distancing, every day these doctors come into closer contact with the deadly virus than virtually anyone else. They showed me how they protect themselves before they step into the lab. Scrubs, a set of rubber gloves taped down, a respirator, a full face shield, gown, and then another pair of gloves.
This is all set. This is the protective gear.
Yes, ma'am.
For the lab technicians that are on the forefront of this fight.
Yes, that is exactly what they would wear at USAMRIID when they're working with coronavirus.
Reports these cases to the World Health Organization on December 31st. And the next day, Wuhan shuts down a seafood market where experts suspect the virus originated. 1 week later, China deems that the mystery illness is a novel coronavirus. They also release the DNA sequence so scientists around the world can start developing a vaccine. They report their first death on January 11th. Fast forward 2 days, coronavirus hits Thailand, the first transmission outside mainland China. In the coming days, Japan and South Korea also announced cases.
肯定有嘛，因为你看我刚刚正好去买了口罩，然后我早上的时候是在我们家小区附近去买口罩，都已经买断了。
And on January 21st, the CDC reports the first U.S. case of coronavirus in Washington state.
This is certainly not a moment for panic or high anxiety. It is a moment for vigilance.
But back in China, the virus continues to grow. Wuhan goes into lockdown, and on January 23rd, they construct a major 1,000-bed hospital within 10 days, according to Chinese media. By the end of the month, things escalate back home. The White House launches a coronavirus task force. Chicago witnesses the first person-to-person transmission in the U.S. And the Trump administration suspends entry for foreign nationals who recently traveled to China. This all brings us to February, when Japan announces an outbreak on the Diamond Princess cruise ship near the port of Yokohama. 3,700 passengers go into quarantine.
The other thing we're concerned about is how are we going to get home right now?
Several Americans test positive for the virus after evacuating the ship. Meanwhile, Italy starts to place some towns under lockdown. And on February 26th, the CDC reports a patient in California with no known travel history or exposure to the virus.
This particular case could be the first possible instance of community transmission of COVID-19 in the United States.
But President Trump downplays the threat.
It's going to disappear. One day it's like a miracle. It will disappear.
Just a few days later, Washington state records the first coronavirus-related death in the United States. At this point, the virus hits 54 countries with nearly 3,000 deaths worldwide. As we enter the month of March, state governments of California, New York, Maryland, Utah, Kentucky, and Oregon declare a state of emergency. And by March 8th, all of Italy goes into lockdown.
Tutte le strutture sanitarie sono in sovraccarico e in difficoltà. Mancano medici, insomma la situazione è complicata.
Then this happens on March 11th.
COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
Then President Trump limits travel from Europe. The NBA postpones its season, and Tom Hanks reveals that he and his wife have the virus. Trump then announces this a couple days later.
I am officially declaring a national emergency. Two very big words.
Now that brings us to the week of March 15th. Scientists in Washington launched the first human trial for a vaccine. The Federal Reserve slashes interest rates to nearly zero. New York City closes its schools, bars, and theaters. The Bay Area tells residents to shelter in place. Trump signs off on an aid package to ease the financial fallout. And China records no new cases for the first time.
The spread of coronavirus has wreaked havoc on daily life, grinding most of our routines and plans to a halt. Schools and universities around the world have canceled classes, professional sports leagues have suspended their seasons, Coachella was postponed, and candidates are canceling their campaign rallies. Major tech conferences around the world are scrapping their events. As of early March, the economic impact of these cancellations had surpassed $1.1 billion. And since that time, the number has only increased as more events are canceled every day.
Facebook announcing that it is canceling its F8 developer conference. The mayor of Austin announcing that he's issuing an order that effectively cancels South by Southwest.
These major tech conferences in particular have a large economic footprint, as attendees are a huge boon for the host cities, hotels, restaurants, and small businesses. Oftentimes, hosting a major conference involves hiring hundreds or even thousands of part-time workers. Now, these workers may find themselves out of a job, and the cities and companies themselves are facing major financial losses. Some major tech cancellations include South by Southwest in Austin, Texas, Google I/O in Mountain View, California, Facebook's F8 event in San Jose, California, and the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, Spain. This news comes as cases of the new coronavirus, COVID-19, have slowed in China but grown rapidly outside the country's borders, throwing international and domestic markets into turmoil.
Take a look at this ugly, ugly day on Wall Street. The Dow and S&P back on track for their worst month since October of 1987.
You don't see days like this very often, Brian.
Major cities from San Francisco to New York have banned large gatherings as diagnoses in the U.S. have soared. It's undoubtedly a smart move for public safety, but all these cancellations, particularly of major conferences, are taking a huge financial toll.
COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
Canceling large gatherings, both domestically and abroad, is now par for the course. This helps promote social distancing. It's a main strategy that the CDC recommends to avoid catching or transmitting the virus. We're at a point now where every large in-person event in the next few months, no matter how significant, is likely facing cancellation. But that does come at a major cost.